first is in the middle of the first scene, just after they're attacked by the sand ship. She's standing next to you, holding a lantern, looking over at you and nodding. She's dressed as a maid, but the light and shadows on her face make it impossible to see her face clearly. The second time is at the end of the same scene, right before you jump into the sand ship. This time she's standing in front of the ship, and you're still in the sand pit when you see her. The third time is in the next scene, when you're getting into the sand ship with Kuro. You don't see her face this time, but you can see her figure very clearly. You're so distracted that you almost don't notice her, but she's definitely there. This is another case where the game doesn't follow the book. In the book, this encounter happens in the same place, but there's no maid. When you first see her, she's walking down a corridor, but when you jump into the sand ship, she's standing outside it looking down at you. I think that this was an intentional choice. The book's description of this event is pretty vague, and you wouldn't have seen the maid in the first two scenes if you weren't already expecting her to be there. By putting the maid in the next scene instead, the game gives you a little more time to look around before it happens and makes you pay closer attention to your surroundings. I don't think it's really a big deal, though. The maid in the game isn't important, and neither is the fact that she appears in 3 different scenes instead of 2. The other thing to note here is that the maid in the game is actually named Shizuku instead of Yuko. That may seem like a minor detail, but I believe that this is a deliberate choice. The scene in which she appears in the game was actually originally intended to be set in a restaurant somewhere in Kyoto, and the characters' names are taken from some of the most well-known traditional restaurants there. It's very easy to find references to Shizuku-style tea in Japan. And one of the most famous locations for that kind of tea is a restaurant called Shizuku. There is also a connection with Yuko Shizuku's name and a particular style of Japanese tea, but that's probably just a coincidence. The restaurant in which the scene was originally set had nothing to do with tea at all, and it just so happened that they had a maid with that name. I'm not sure how much thought went into the naming of the maid, but it's certainly possible that they were trying to tie it to Yuko's character from the book. If you want to get into the specifics of Shizuku tea, you can find a lot of information on it by searching online. There are lots of different types of tea named after Shizuku, and many of them are variations on Sensha. I don't have a great deal of knowledge about tea, so I can't tell you how authentic they really are, but it's interesting nonetheless. Shizuku is a rare instance of an NPC with a name in the game that matches their description in the book. The other example of this is with Hajime, who is named Takeshi in the game instead of Kuniko. As far as I know, the name hasn't appeared anywhere else in the series. I'd love to hear if anyone else has found other examples of this. Shizuku herself doesn't have much of a presence in the game. She shows up twice as a background character in scenes that you shouldn't even see. It would have been nice if there was a bit more to her than that, but I don't think they could have added too much without ruining the flow of the game. I can understand why the author of the game decided to include this character. She does add some flavor to the atmosphere. But personally, I don't think she adds anything important to the plot. Her only real purpose in the game is to be a little mysterious. But in my opinion, her role as a mysterious figure is made less effective because she has such a minor part. If they were to add more content with her, I would have liked to see her have a larger part. Maybe something like showing up again near the end of the story and actually doing something. That would be cool. She's certainly not one of the main cast, but I think she would have made a good supporting character. Perhaps she could have had a more active role in the story, like traveling with Kuro or joining you on your adventures. It's a shame that she never gets to play a bigger role in the story, but I don't think she should have been given more focus. Shizuku is probably the only female NPC in the game. Of course, there are lots of female NPCs in the story, but none of them ever speak or make any major decisions. Shizuku doesn't speak any lines either, but she does make a few appearances in the cutscenes. She doesn't really have any personality or expressiveness, though she just stands there with her hands clasped behind her back and looks at you with her head tilted to one side. Her expression doesn't change at all during the scenes where she's talking to you. Her first scene is at the beginning of the game. You're on top of the mountain near the temple where the old man tells you to find Kuro. You're facing north, and she's standing just off to your left. When she appears, she walks over to stand next to you, facing the same direction as you. You can see her face very clearly in the scene. Her second scene is at the end of the first stage. You're still in the sand ship as it flies through the clouds, but you changed into your normal outfit. There's also a bunch of other people there now. Shizuku is standing on top of the ship, looking down at you as you jump into the pit. She's still dressed as a maid. Our third and final scene is at the very end of the second stage, right before you fight Kuro. Again, she's still dressed as a maid, and this time she's standing next to you while you talk to Kuro. She looks at you with that same tilted head for most of the scene, and she's not wearing her normal outfit like she was at the start of the stage. She's one of my favorite characters in the game, but I've always wondered why she was called Shizuku rather than Yuko. The only real connection between Shizuku's style tea and Yuko is that they both take their names from famous traditional restaurants in Kyoto, so it's possible that they were trying to tie them together. But as I mentioned before, this connection is probably just a coincidence, because they weren't originally planned to be connected in any way. Shizuku was actually designed after Hajime. She was originally going to have a white mage outfit instead of her maid outfit, but when they decided on making her a maid, they thought that she would look better with a white outfit than Hajime did. So they decided to go with the maid outfit instead. That's why you can't find her in any white clothes during the game. All of her scenes are set at nighttime, so she would have looked very strange if she was wearing a white dress or robe. She doesn't speak any lines either, but she does make a few appearances in the cutscenes. In one scene, she stands just to the left of your character and watches as Hajime and Kuro fight in the sand ship. She doesn't say anything during the scene, but she does move her head from side to side when Kuro dodges Hajime's attacks. In the next scene, you're standing outside the sand ship with Kuro, and Shizuku is still standing just to your right. You're facing Kuro, and Hajime are facing away from you and out of sight. Shizuku tilts her head to one side again, and when Hajime attacks, you can see her hands moving in front of her face, as if she's trying to block something from view. The last time she appears in-game is near the end of Stage 2, right before you get into the sand ship. You're still fighting Hajime and Kuro in a ship, but you're in normal clothes now and there aren't any other people around. Kuro has taken some damage, but he's still standing strong. Shizuku is still wearing her maid outfit and is standing next to you. You're facing away from her, and her hands are clasped behind her back again. But this time, when Hajime attacks Kuro and you fall down onto your butt, Shizuku is quick to catch you and pull you back up onto your feet. She looks at you with that same tilted head as before, and when she lets go of you, she quickly retreats back to where she was standing earlier. She's always just watching and not saying anything, so she might not seem very important in the story, but I think she's one of my favorite characters from the game. The reason why is that she feels very human to me. I feel like she's not really there. It feels like she's just watching us play through the game. If you were to look closely enough, you could see that she's not really there at all. It's just some kind of illusion that looks like she is. But even so, she feels real enough for me to want to get to know her a little better. The scene where she catches you as you fall is especially nice to me. It shows how much she cares about you, even though you've barely met her yet. And the way she's holding her hands behind her back is really cute too. I can just imagine that it's part of her normal maid outfit, so she always does it like that when she's standing there waiting for someone to need her help. Her design has a few connections to other characters in the game. For one thing, her hair color is dark red like Kuro's. This probably just coincided with their color schemes, but I'm pretty sure that she was originally supposed to be blonde like Yuko. I'm not sure what made them change her hair color. Maybe they wanted her to stand out more? The other connection between Shizuku and Kuro is that both of them have those very subtle smiles on their faces throughout the entire game. When they smile like that, their eyes are wide open and their lips are pressed tightly together, which makes their whole face look very calm and relaxed. I think this is one of the most appealing expressions for NPCs, so I wish more games would include more scenes like this one. She's always smiling in a calm and relaxed way, so I think it's safe to say that her smile looks very natural and unforced. She's not forcing her mouth to form these gentle smiles. She's not trying to put on a show for you. This is the kind of smile that someone would naturally make whenever they were enjoying themselves. It's one of the many reasons why I think Shizuku is my favorite character from the game. If you really want to see more of Shizuku, then you should try playing the game all over again. You can do this by entering a code from your save file at the beginning of Stage 1. If you do this, then Shizuku will join your party permanently and will accompany you from now on. The first time you run into Shizuku, she'll greet you by saying, "You must be Koichi-san." She only ever says your name once during the entire game. If you run into her later on and talk to her again, she'll respond differently depending on what you say. You can even say, "Nice to meet you," or "What's your name?" and she'll tell you. When Shizuku first joins your party, she'll start walking alongside you, but then she'll stop and look at you like you've done something wrong. Then she'll ask if you're going somewhere important, and if you answer, yes, and she'll keep following you all the way to the end of the stage. If you don't want her to follow you, then you can just tell her, no, and she'll leave your party immediately. When Shizuku stays in your party after this point, she won't be able to follow you all the way to the end of each stage anymore, so you'll have to leave her behind when you're ready to go on. If you try leaving her behind while you're already inside the sand ship, she'll just stay in the ship with you. It's not really a big deal since it doesn't bother you either way, but it can get a little annoying after a while if you're trying to rush through the game and get to the next stage as soon as possible. This isn't much different from when Shizuku joins your party permanently after beating the game the first time. She'll still be able to walk beside you at the beginning of each stage and will still stay with you until the end. The only difference is that this time you'll get to see more of her. One nice thing about having Shizuku in your party all the time is that she can use her healing magic to help Hajime and Kuro recover from their injuries. Her magic is so strong that it can even heal all of Kuro's damage in one cast, but it does come with a price. Shizuku uses all her MP when using her healing magic, so if she uses it on Kuro too much, then he'll start running out of MP and will start taking more damage. Kuro will say something along these lines when Shizuku heals him. Kuro! Ooh, thanks, Shizuku-sen! That was really close! Shizuku, don't mention it. Shizuku's healing magic isn't very practical for fighting off against multiple enemies or boss battles, but it's perfect for healing up Kuro after you've just had a battle with him or when he gets hit while guarding Hajime from an enemy attack. I definitely recommend keeping Shizuku in your party at all times. She's super cute and is very useful for helping Hajime and Kuro heal up between battles. The only problem with having Shizuku follow you around is that it takes up one of your slots in your party menu, so if you want to add another person, then Shizuku has to be left behind. It doesn't affect Hajime's health or stamina, so you can just switch Shizuku back into your party after you're finished fighting for the day if you want to take her with you from now on. Shizuku's voice actress was also Yukana Yumoto, who was also the voice actress for Yuko from the original Phantasy Star Ramen 4. As mentioned before, Shizuku was originally supposed to be a white mage. If this was true, then we could assume that there would be a connection between her and Yuko in some way. However, they weren't originally going to be connected at all, so there isn't really a reason why she would be named Shizuku instead of Yuko. I think it was just an unfortunate coincidence that she ended up being named after the white mage from Phantasy Star Ramen 2. There's actually an official art book that was released for the original Phantasy Star Ramen 2 in Japan, and one of the character profiles in that book was for Shizuku. The profile for Shizuku doesn't say anything about her name or her connection with Yuko. It only tells you how she was designed and how her job was decided. This character profile was written by Masato Yano, the main programmer for Phantasy Star Ramen 2. He had a lot of input into how the game was made, including the designs of all of the NPCs. He was a very famous programmer back in the 80s and 90s, and he worked on tons of different video games throughout his career. He worked on titles such as Battle Chess, Battle Clash, Zanuck, Dragon Quest, and Phantasy Star Ramen 2. He's now retired, and he's currently living in Kyoto, Japan. He has been a member of the Japanese Game Developers Association since 1994, so he's probably a pretty big deal in the Japanese gaming industry right now.